Hi, everyone. Our final session will focus on the international implications of the conflict and focus on the role of the United States, China, and India, as well as the limitations of international institutions in responding to the conflict of this magnitude. The panel will examine the geopolitical ripple effect of the Iran-Israel conflict, from great power competition to the delicate balance of the middle powers, such as India, and our speakers will provide perspectives on how international actors are reshaping security and diplomacy in the Middle East and beyond. Our first speaker will be Mr. Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, who is a former ambassador of India to Syria, Afghanistan, and Myanmar. During his career in the Indian Foreign Service, he had worked in various capacities in Indian embassies and missions in Mexico, Cuba, France, and the United Nations. He also worked for the Ministry of External Affairs and on deputation of the Ministries of Culture and Defense of India at different points of time. He's an alumni of the National Defense College, India, and has been a senior fellow of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington, D.C. He's currently a senior visiting professor with the Center for Policy Research in Delhi.
I can't hear the speaker properly.
Can you hear me now, sir? Sure. Our second speaker will be Mr. Manoj Joshi. He's a distinguished fellow at ORF. He's a journalist and commentator who has specialized on security issues and has worked with The Hindu, The Times of India, The Hindustan Times, and the India Today group. He's been part of the formal and informal consultation processes of the Government of India. In 2011, he was appointed by the Government of India to the Task Force on National Security. He has authored books including Understanding the India-China Border and the Enduring Threat of War in High Himalaya. He currently teaches a course on national security at ACJ. And finally, Mr. M.K. Narayanan. He was our Director of Intelligence Bureau and Chairman of the Joint Intelligence Committee for the Government of India from 1987 to 1992. He was National Security Advisor and Specialized Advisor to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh from May 2004 to January 2010. He was appointed Government of State of West Bengal in 2010 and remained in office until 2014. So without further ado, I kindly request the speakers and the chair to join me on stage.
I'm extremely thankful for a former National Security Advisor and Governor of West Bengal, Mr. M.K. Narayan, for having consented to be on this panel, Ambassador Mukhopadhyay, and Dr. Manoj Joshi, who will be online with us. Well, this session will look at the larger perspectives, as indicated by Dikshi in the first slide, the impact of this war on Iran-Israel war, the conflict on the region, at the global level, and particularly for India in terms of what it means for India in the context of our interests, the context of foreign policy, and our relations with others as well. Second is what has been the role of Russia and China in this conflict. And we must remember that there was a few statements that were released, particularly by Putin in the aftermath of the conflict, that there is a strategic partnership between Iran and Russia, but it doesn't go into the defense support domain. And that's a very interesting statement, because he also follows it up by saying that we did ask for them, but they were not interested. So this is one important element we need to see. What has been China's role? China is very particular on its engagement with the region, and there are many economic factors that come into this picture as well. As previous speakers in the previous sessions pointed out, both Russia and China may not be interested in Iran going nuclear, but they would also make sure that no regime change takes place. They would want Iran to be sovereignty to be respected, and at the same time enable Iran to stand strongly on its economic strength as well. And therefore, there is a lot that Iran becomes part of the China's Belt and Road Initiative program, which is an economic program. There is also a Russia engagement with Iran in the North-South corridor, which is again an economic program. And then we had our own Chabahar, project in Iran, and all that has a very nice cocktail in terms of the geopolitics of the region as well. How does this play out in the context of the Americans now trying to restructure the global economic order and the trade regime with Trump's tariffs and other things that are coming out? While Trump may look and sound very, impulsive and frivolous, but you must remember that in all this, his statements and his actions, there is a strong background team that's in play, and they have a certain methodology with which they are working on. Israel is an important player in that entire process, and Iran is again an important element in that entire strategy. We must also remember when Iranian revolution took place, Iran was in the grip of the Western countries, and with the Shah having been removed, Iran virtually went fairly ballistic against the Western interests. And that has moderated over the years, and that is why in the previous session I raised that question. When you meet a lot of Iranians who are from Tehran as well as expats living elsewhere, they still have a lot of orientation towards understanding the Western process and the Western theories of international relations and geopolitics. And that is one of the important reasons we need to actually look into as to why Iran has not taken a firm stand of dumping the West despite all these sanctions and all these, difficulties that they encounter. So they still look forward to engaging the Europe, engaging the Americans, while China, India are still seen as safe areas of engagement, and they're not worried about it. India and Iran have traditional civilizational links, a long history, and I think we need to look at how we take a relook in the context of this current conflict. So with this initial input, let me not take more time. Let me invite Mr. M.K. Narayanan to comment on two major issues, and thereafter, of course, he can expand his comments. The speakers can take about 10 to 12 minutes in their initial comments, and thereafter we will engage on the conversation. Where does India stand in this current conflict, given the fact that our relations were established in 1991, we recognized Israel in 1991, and since then it has grown from strength to strength, and our strategic partnership, particularly on the defense, intelligence, and technology domain, is extremely strong. And in this entire 3 years of conflict in Gaza and even in the Iran-Israel conflict, we have not called out Israel explicitly. For many in the global south, Israel is the aggressor against Iran, but we've not made a statement. And when the US put a pressure on sanctions on Iran, we stopped buying oil from Iran, who was one of the biggest oil suppliers to India. And now, how do we look at this new development? Will this create more room for Russia and China at the expense of India? Second is, with BRICS going from strength to strength, what is our position in terms of taking our stand in this particular issue? Are we going, particularly after Trump's tariffs against us in this month, are we going to take a relook at BRICS and strengthening our position in BRICS? And how will this play out in the context of this particular conflict? So,
thank you, Air Marshal Matheson. And my old friend and colleague, Gautam. Of course, Manoj Joshi is not here.
it's online.
We were antagonists, not friends, when I was the NSA. so in some ways, I'm glad he's not present here, because we always cross swords. I don't know what the rules of the Asian College of Journalism are, but do I have to follow what you said? Or can I say what I want to say?
What do you want to say? Yes, sir.
The reason why I say that is that I think we in India have a larger-than-life image of where we stand, particularly on the West, in the West Asia. We used to be a very important country as far as West Asia is concerned, but not because of anything particular, but it's over the years, I think we are less influential in West Asia than what we were, I would say, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I think we need to set our sights accordingly. And I thought I might start with doing a rerun of what I think exists as far as the Israel-Iran conflict is concerned, rather than jumping to the points that were mentioned as to whether there was a failure of intelligence, where did we stand, etc. Because I think we tend to see, I would say in many ways, Israel not necessarily from our views of the past, but more so from the views of the West. And I think we need to be clear as to where Iran and where Israel stand, and then we can have a discussion as to what we need to do. I would begin by saying, I've got a few set points and I'll read out of that. I would begin by saying that the eruption of direct hostilities between Iran and Israel in June this year surprised most observers of the Middle East scene. There are many who said that they anticipated this, but I think it took most observers by surprise. The direct clash between these two countries marks, and I say this with all the strength of my basic knowledge, a very significant and possibly a watershed moment in the geopolitics of the Middle East. Hitherto, as Air Marshal Matheson said a few minutes ago, we saw a shadow struggle rooted in ideological antagonism and a kind of a proxy war against a backdrop of nuclear bricksmanship. This has now become an open conflict, and it is almost like opening the Pandora's box. What it has immediately meant is that it has damaged the underpinnings of regional deterrence, complicated great power strategies, and significantly altered the Middle East power architecture. Third, as was just briefly mentioned by the Air Marshal, it is the Islamic Revolution of 1979 that ruptured Tehran's once cordial relations with Israel. Many of you, the youngsters who are present here, would never have known. There was a period when Israel and Iran were friends. They certainly aren't today. Across the succeeding decades, both sides have become increasingly entangled in strategic calculations and all kinds of animosities of different kinds. Iran has been leaning on proxy militias for decades now, and Israel perceives Iran as an existential threat. Succeeding decades have witnessed several variations of a shadow conflict, cross-border struggles, and repeated skirmishes along Syria's Golden Heights. Today, Iran follows a policy of proxy war, or I wouldn't say today, till now. Iran follows a policy of proxy war through the Hezbollah, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, and Iraqi militants. Israel engaged in counter-terror operations and directed killings of Iranian commanders in Syria and elsewhere. Over time, the battle lines soon hardened, and as Iran increasingly leveraged its militias, Israel resorted to cross-border roads to degrade Iran's influence across the region. I'm mentioning this to say that during this entire period, while we in India perceive ourselves as an influence in the region, we had nothing to do. And I think this is something that we need to worry about. I mean, it's not something that we may like to mention in public, but this, I think, is an academic fora. We need to understand that we were once influential, we are no longer influential. Please understand that, and we have to therefore decide the kind of policies that would be adequate for this situation. Coming next to the geopolitical shifts of recent years, which have shaped or reshaped regional alliances, new arrangements such as the Abraham Accords, new undercurrents of uncertainty across the region have all brought new forces into the equation. Israel sought to use the situation to marginalize Iran through what we call diplomatic isolation. Iran sought opportunities to break out of what it viewed as increasing encirclement. I would say that one reason for the strategic calculus changing very dramatically has been the advances in technological and military developments. The use of unmanned aerial systems, hypersonic missiles, cyber capabilities, and integrated air defense networks have led each side to view the strategic calculus as if it's in their own favor. Iran has invested heavily in drone swarms, capable of saturating air defenses, and in ballistic missiles to threaten Israel and Israel's capabilities. Israel, having obtained US F-35 fighters, Iron Dome enhancements, and cutting-edge cyber warfare units, believes it can neutralize any Iranian offensive. Today, given the nature of air and space-based surveillance and the signal intelligence possessed by both sides, each side now has an unprecedented situational awareness of what is present. They are not going into any conflict blind. This is aggravating the situation. Rather than deterring either nation, it seems to have enhanced the importance of preemption, and that is precisely what has happened in the latest incident. What are the immediate catalysts for escalation in June? We can surmise, but I do think that it was possibly Iran's announcement that it would enrich uranium to 60% fissile purity, and that too in the near future. This, apart from certain other events, had a catalytic effect on an already tense situation. Finally, I dare say that it is not surprising that the US afforded all-out support to Israel, announcing that it was a key ally. This further strengthened Israel's belief that it could win the war with Iran. Russia and China have adopted a policy of calculated ambiguity. I use the word classical ambiguity with care. Israel and the West's calculations notwithstanding, they have not effectively destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities. It has adversely affected Iran's medium-range missile inventory, but certainly not its nuclear capabilities. In the complex interplay of ideology, technological capabilities, and shifting alliances, neither side has gained anything significant from the latest conflict or war. On the other hand, Iran, while suffering losses, achieved at least a political objective, namely rallying domestic unity. This was fraying at the edges. People were questioning Khomeini's what he was doing was right or wrong. That has been cemented over. And leveraging, in some ways, direct global mediation through various channels. Israel, for its part, has ensured, or at least succeeded in ensuring, the total commitment of the US to Israel's future strategies, in essence, of destroying the underpinnings of the Palestinian state. So this is the confused situation that exists in the Middle East. I wanted to set this record straight, Air Marshal, so that when the debate goes on, I do not want to refer to it at that point. So, notwithstanding what comes out in the newspapers, notwithstanding what leaders on all sides keep saying, we have a very difficult situation. And if Iran is going to be a player, if India is going to be a player in the Iran-Israel conflict, we need to think afresh as to what we can and what we should not do. It's important that we look at it from that point of view rather than... I found in the couple of questions that had been said to me about the failure of intelligence. There's no failure of intelligence. The intelligence was there for all to see. All that we really wanted to know, would we see it or not? You mentioned, of course, our failure, if I might use that word, of taking sides when it came to the decision on Israel's activities in the United Nations. But that's diplomacy. That has nothing to do with understanding the situations. So I will leave it at that, and I will leave Gautam to go forward, and then when we start the discussions, we'll revert to that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let me bring Manoj into the picture, and it's important what Mr. Narayan pointed out in terms of the war per se, where Iran exhibited significant strength in terms of the ballistic missiles, the role of UAVs, and which probably surprised or exposed the Israel's weakness in its air defense system as well. That is one new development in the technology domain, and I think it's a result of years of development that has happened, and some of the testings of these ideas and strategies have already been demonstrated in Ukraine as well, and Iran has supplied a lot of UAVs and missiles to Russia as well for their war. So in that context, we depend a lot, or rather, we have a significant technology and defense partnership with Israel. Does that give us some worry, one? And second is, in the context of this main issue being the nuclear issue, and we discussed that in the previous session as well, is that why is Iran circumscribed with respect to its position in the NPT? Why cannot it free itself of those obligations and stitch up probably a better strategic partnership with others, if that is possible, whether it's Russia or China? And then where do we see now the future of NPT and the future of IAEA being accused of having taken sides in this particular conflict? Manoj, yours.
Thank you, Air Marshal Matheshwaran. I'd like to thank the Peninsula Foundation and the ACJ for this opportunity and to address. Unfortunately, I have to do so online. So, Mr. Narayanan, Ambassador Mukhopadhyay, my fellow panelists, I had basically to address two principal issues. One was the question of deepening ties with Israel while maintaining strategic cooperation with Iran. And the second is the issue of NPT. Now, in my view, in the immediate term, there is still a need for India to urge de-escalation and undertake hedging, because the conflict is still hanging. It hasn't quite settled down. India should follow its policy of strategic autonomy and non-alignment, whose features are a deep concern for the situation and a call for de-escalation, and calling on the two countries to avoid any escalatory steps, because all this is still possible. We should lay emphasis on dialogue and diplomacy, and for utilizing existing channels to de-escalate the situation and resolve the underlying issue. We should maintain good relations with both countries India enjoys close and friendly relations with both Iran and Israel, and it has stated its readiness to extend all possible support to them. We should prioritize the safety of our citizens. Now, this is also important because India has been actively involved in evacuating its nationals from both Iran and Israel amidst the conflict. We should maintain a non-aligned posture in the international forums. Why I'm saying this is, we have distanced ourselves from statements made by regional blocs like the SCO that had condemned Israel's actions. We had stayed away, maintained a kind of a non-aligned posture. Then we must focus on national interests. India's approach is driven by national interests, including energy security, importantly, economic stability, and the welfare of its large diaspora in the region. An important aspect of the Indian policy is to treat any issue relating to the Straits of Hormuz as a major threat. We should not forget, for us, the Straits of Hormuz, whatever happens there is extremely important. We need to hedge against its closure, because disruption of supply through this Straits of Hormuz, 30% of the seaborne oil supply moves, and a lot of oil supply to India. So we must definitely have an important aspect of our policy to look at any threat to that as a major threat. Now, when we look at Iran, I think we must protect our connectivity bets with Iran. So one important thing is to ring fence Chabahar. Now we must treat the 10-year Chabahar operating pact as a connectivity issue because it provides aid, medicines, Afghanistan, relief to Afghanistan, and not a sanctions busting exercise. We must keep payments and insurance compliant, meaning in the port itself, because there's always efforts to derail the India-Iran ties. So we must be very careful that the payments, insurance compliant, transparent with carve-outs that we have been worked before. So whatever we worked with the Americans on Chabahar, we need to ensure that we observe those conditions. Secondly, we must keep the international north-south transportation corridor warm. Why I say this is a long-running project which links Western Indian ports to Europe through Russia and Iran. And I think this is a very important connectivity project which virtually rivals the Belt and Road initiative. So this is with Iran. Now with Israel, we need to keep the Israel technology and defense pipeline flowing. So we must prioritize non-controversial co-production. So if there's co-production that to be had with Israel, we should go with it. India is the top destination for Israeli arms exports. India is the largest single importer of Israeli arms, accounting for some 34% in 2024. And now we must make a push for Make in India UAVs, air defense subsystems, secure communications, cyber, along with civilian technologies, water and agricultural technologies, deliverables that raise readiness, without being threatening to the US-Israel relationship. We have to be careful that we do not, in this search for technology, defense technology, do not breach those limits. So this is Iran and Israel. The third is that energy security that reduces political exposure. We must continue flexible sourcing of crude oil. So Middle East, and we have seen this with regard to the Russia problem now. So we need to look at the Middle East, Russia, US, Africa to blunt any single theater shock. So we should not be caught up in any single theater situation where we are too dependent on the Gulf. And we must use market tools, not geopolitical bets. Of course, along with that, there should be some messaging on our part. We should be seen as a stability provider. New Delhi will have to make efforts to have ties with Israel, defense technology, seen as being accompanied by visible regional public goods. So the ties with Israel should also make it very clear to the other Gulf partners, that we are involved in Gulf worker safety, energy market steadiness, humanitarian aid to Gaza. Last year we gave, medicines through the UN system. I don't think that is too well known, but that is important signaling to the Gulf region. Second is, we must privately warn all sides that strikes threatening Hormuz, the Hormuz situation, Indian shipping or Chabahar operations will trigger diplomatic response from India, because those are very important immediate concerns for us. The bottom line is that we must treat Israel for capability, we must deal with Israel for capability and technology, while we have to deal with Iran for geography and connectivity, and for Gulf Hormuz macro stability. So we have two distinct things. One is the defense capability and technology, and the other is a function of geography and connectivity. Now, when it comes to the NPT, this is an important and timely question. The big question here is, are NPT, IAEA, and UNSC still credible pillars of the non-proliferation regime? That's the big question out here. Is it time to rethink them? Now, Iran has suspended all IAEA cooperation and inspections in response to Israel and US military strikes on its nuclear sites. The IAEA inspectors have left and no access is expected until a new framework is agreed on. Now, Iran's parliament has voted overwhelmingly to halt IAEA safeguards, citing sovereignty and safety concerns. And Iran's foreign minister has openly stated that US attacks have undermined the NPT. So threats to withdraw from the treaty are now being debated in the Iranian parliament. Now, it is well known, we all know India itself is one of the countries which has not signed the NPT. NPT has a flawed discriminatory framework, which then transfers itself to the IAEA also, which excludes undeclared or military sites. So of course, the additional protocol enhances IAEA access, but half of NPT members, including Iran, have not ratified it. The second thing is the UN Security Council. Now, the UN Security Council referrals for non-compliance frequently stall, because the UN Security Council is divided. Just now you made reference to Russia and Chinese postures. So enforcement is limited. There is no efficient legal mechanism to respond to the withdrawal from NPT or interruption in safeguards. There's absolutely no mechanism. So are these frameworks still credible or in need of reform? Now, we know that the NPT regime remains central to global norms against proliferation. So they are important. IAEA provides essential, if imperfect, verification capacity. And the UN Security Council retains the legal heft needed to authorize non-proliferation action. But all of them, as we have said, have been flawed. So there are a number of key reforms required to restore the credibility of the IAEA, of the NPT system, of the UNGA, UNSC, etc. And the bottom line out here is that the non-proliferation architecture still holds moral and institutional weight, in my view. But its fault lines are widening, especially when major powers use force or signal withdrawal. To safeguard global security, we need comprehensive modernization, stronger verification tools, fairer disarmament politics, inclusive decision-making, and adaptation to new technological threats. So I'll just conclude here, because these are the points I had to make on my watch. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj. The balancing position that we should take is what you recommend. Let me come to Ambassador Mukhopadhyay. The issue of American involvement in this entire process there are enough evidence, including Trump's statement, President Trump's statement, that the attack by Israel in Iran, while the talks with Iran was going on, was already planned. And so the credibility of an international institution, the credibility of the US itself is a big question mark. That's one. While the Israelis were launching the attack, or before launching the attack, while the talks for reviving the JCPOA was going on with the US, Trump made a statement that the plan for Israeli attack was already made. And this is something probably we could take cognizance of. So that was the US playing a double game. That's one part. Second is, I don't know if you all seen General Clark's one of the videos in this interview, and this is as early as 2008 or so, where he talks about the Pentagon pulling out an information saying there is a series of 8 countries that will fall one by one. And he lists out, starting off from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Libya, and then Afghanistan, and then follows it up as the last one to fall should be Iran. Right. So we probably can revisit that in terms of looking at the motives. So did the US its attack on the Iranian nuclear sites is a culmination of this larger strategic objective that they've actually decided as early as probably 2001 or probably between 2001 and 2010. That's one part. So it's a geopolitics of a larger game. Second is, when the Stuxnet attack took place and demolished or damaged the centrifuges in the Iranian first nuclear attack, it was done by both Israel and US. I did a course, international security course in Harvard John F. Kennedy School in 2013, and we had the State Department official now actually giving a presentation and saying, yes, we did this, but there is no attributability that you can ever, ascribe to, and that's always a problem with cyber attacks. That's one part. So cyber tool has this problem, and therefore, with one of the commanders, U.S. Marine commander as the chief, the Europeans and the Americans got together to actually develop the norms and rules and regulations with respect to cyber attack and what constitutes an attack on another country as a violation of a sovereignty. These were to be decided. It didn't make any headway. It's in cold storage right now. So in that context, the attacks have already been a consistent strategy, both with Israel and the US, with respect to other countries emerging, whatever kind of a nuclear capability is. So in this context, I think there's the American motives, irrespective of which president is in the chair right now, has been consistent that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon capability, and therefore, while you're talking and putting limitations on the nuclear, in terms of nuclear proliferation treaty, you are also working simultaneously to actually do the damage through an attack. So the Israeli attack on Iran is an explicitly approved strategy by the Americans. This is something probably the world will have to take cognizance of. Does India need to take this into account? Because in the future, while we don't recognize the NPT, but we are signatory to the 2008 nuclear deal, by which we've crossed the other side, how does that put us in this entire position? This is one of the issues that probably you would like to take a look at.
Thank you. Thank you, Air Marshal Matheeswaran. I hope it's okay if I speak from here. Well, firstly, I must say it's with some trepidation that I follow Mr. Narayanan and Manoj, and I'm very grateful to both of them as well as to the speakers in the forenoon session, both for the information and the insights that they provided and the background that we have for this particular session. Of course, before I go further, let me please also acknowledge and thank the Peninsula Foundation, the Asian College of Journalism, Mr. Shashi Kumar, Air Marshal Matheeswaran, and of course it's a great pleasure to be talking to all the students of the college as well. So you've sort of given me some really big questions to answer, but let me start by and I'll address it in two parts. One slightly granular and one somewhat sweeping in a geopolitical context. So the first point is the US-Israeli relationship and what does Trump introduce into it. And I would say that the US-Israeli relationship is foundational. It is rock solid. It is not likely to change. We are seeing that in the reactions to everything that we have seen on Gaza so far. It's the one relationship that has been untouched. But that President Trump, like in everything that he does and he touches, and that is even Israel cannot be exempt from in a way, that there are two elements that enter into any calculation, including perhaps the Israeli calculation. One calculation is President Trump's propensity to think in terms of deals, to even think in terms of foreign policy, in terms of business deals. In fact, I would say there's very little foreign policy. One could stretch the analogy a bit and think that President Trump now thinks the United States is his company and foreign policy is business dealing for that company. So the thought at the back of the mind of anyone, including Israel, including President Netanyahu, is that could this person swing at any point to do a deal? And this is coupled with his known aversion for wars and this tendency to think that wars are a waste of time and money, most of all, because in fact that's the way he thinks. This is one. And the second is the sheer capriciousness and unpredictability of the person. So, at the time that he announced the ceasefire, I don't know if many of you noticed that while I agree with all that you said, and, I endorse that a lot of this was pre-planned, it was rock solid, it was, obviously rehearsed from, gamed and perhaps rehearsed not just on tabletops for a long time. He also, in one of his press conferences, more than grudgingly conceded the Iranian performance during the war. That means there was a kind of admiration that Iran managed to hit back. And I would say that that's not something to be just simply passed over or ignored. That means, somewhere at the back of his mind is lodged this idea that, and if he could do a deal with Pakistan over cryptocurrencies and oil, I mean, what is to say that President Trump may not think about Iran also in such business and, so we talk about him being erratic, but, he could switch. And I even wonder whether in the conduct of the war, the fact is that he did what he was expected to do, which is to join Israel in attacking Iran's nuclear facilities. But he did it within a limited time frame. He called off the war in a limited time frame. He got the message from the Iranians when it came to the attacks in Qatar. He picked up the signals and he responded. So I'm not so sure at the end of this war, the Israelis, for all their gratitude and support for the US, are all that convinced that that support is to be taken for granted. Of course, it is to be taken for granted systemically, because systemically in the United States, this relationship is rock solid. But there is that personal element that comes in, and I think is even stronger with the Zionists in particular. Yeah. So that part is there. There is something solid, and there is something capricious or erratic and unpredictable in this relationship. Even if we look at, so that's, I think, as far as the broad thing. But let me also step back and actually just see geopolitical shifts and, to address your question on where India or middle powers and all that come in. I totally agree with Mr. Narayanan that, we perhaps have an imagination that we have a role to play. In fact, we have retrenched from playing an international role compared to the past. The kind of role that we played post-independence, the kind of role that we played in decolonization, in peacekeeping. We imagine that we have a big role to play now, but in fact we have retrenched and we are increasingly unable to play that role. And I would say there are 2 or 3 really very major geopolitical transitions that have taken place. Firstly, we moved from a bipolar world to a unipolar moment, and then we fancied thinking of ourselves also as part of a multipolar world. But in fact, it was never a multipolar world, because what people don't realize is that it was always a tricentric world. And though Russia was not talked about, Russia was a latent power, which has now shown its sort of hard power. It may not have great soft power, but it has shown its hard power. So in fact, there were only 3 countries that were capable of acting on their own and on a larger than just purely regional dimension. Other powers, maybe they could act in the region, but they always needed the help of some other major power to do that. The second big difference is that, unlike in the Cold War, where people talked in the name of a larger common interest, whether it was open societies, open economies, or it was internationalism and solidarity, we have an increasingly selfish world. So in fact, when I say tricentric, I mean both self-centric and 3 powers. So it's a selfish world. And I think it's precisely in the fact that it's a very self-centric, tricentric world that Israel has found the space to be able to act as it has, with the degree of impunity and support that it has had from the world. I mean, we have not seen a genocide being shown live-streamed, a genocide that includes starvation and slow sort of genocide being live-streamed in the world without really much resistance. In the morning, we talked about, the Arab street, but we haven't seen the Arab street express itself. We have seen the Western streets express themselves, but we haven't seen its impact really on, major policy decisions. And we have seen, in fact, pushback in the United States. So what we have seen is a movement, but I would add 2 other dimensions to it. One is the factor of Trump, and what I talked about, the capriciousness, the erraticness, and the personality-centric and almost business-like deal kind of approach. But I think we should also factor in one more development, whether the Trump factor, like Gorbachev some decades back, signifies or personifies or embodies a larger Western decline. And what is the world that we are coming to now? And increasingly in this world, I see that the balance of power is shifting towards China and Russia, and therefore the salience of BRICS, and talk about the de-dollarization of the economy. And where do we stand in that? Actually, we stand nowhere. We think that we are playing all 3 parties, but in fact, the very danger is that we may be playing no party at all. And at the end of it, each party will find it, their relationship with us unsatisfactory, and that we might find ourselves, falling between the cracks and the spaces between the 3. I agree that strategic autonomy remains our only course, and I'm not trying to say we should go one way or the other, but I see ourselves increasingly falling onto a kind of dependency. It used to be with the United States, but it could tomorrow be with others. And in a way, it is visible in our policy towards China. A lot of people feel, and I think I agree with that our policy towards China is now weak-kneed, and we are unable to say anything to China. And the natural progression of this kind of Trump tariff sort of thing is that we might be pushed step by step more and more into the arms of, call them authoritarian or dictators or whatever they are, but people who are willing to offer their protection in return for some returns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and that's quite a concern. On that note, let me pose a question to you. So in this war, I think Iran has come out a little stronger, as you also pointed out some of the benefits, apart from the strengthening of the internal unity and the nationalism part. But I would look at the war part. While their air defense and their aircraft were obsolete and air defense was weak, and the Israel within the first attack said we've got complete air supremacy and we can attack wherever we want to, they recovered very quickly and they were able to launch attacks on Israel, with Israel unable to do anything to prevent those attacks. That's one. So that shows that while they've ignored their aircraft and those technologies, they've concentrated significantly over the last 20, 30 years in building up the missile capabilities and the drone capabilities. And that, I think, has paid rich dividends in this. And it's also demonstrating to the world that much hyped about Iron Dome air defense system has actually failed significantly by getting oversaturated. That is one part. Second, their missile attacks have been precise. The Weizmann Institute was destroyed completely, one of the foremost research institutes, both in biotechnology and some of the technology areas, was completely destroyed. And by some news items, a lot of scientists were killed as well in that attack. Plus, the Israelis have suppressed a lot of information. Quite a few missiles found their military targets significantly as well. So that actually gives a certain amount of cause for concern in terms of the technology capabilities that the Iranians have been able to achieve. Now they're moving to actually address the gaps that they've now identified. They're buying 40 J-10s from the Chinese. They're buying the S-400 from the Russians. And now this would bring a different balance of power in terms of the regional dynamics in the region. Where would this take in terms of the future course of action, both from the Americans and from the Israelis in this context? And how will that make a difference to us? Because we want to have equal relationship with both, but if Iran moves more closely to China, and where does that put us in this entire game here? With Pakistan operating J-10s, Iran operating J-10s, similar air defense systems, where do we stand on this entire process?
I'm in no position to contest what you talk in terms of military modernization. And there's no doubt that the Iron Dome has not been an Iron Dome. It was penetrated adequately to prove. And I'm surprised that India is now talking in terms of a super domes across the country. I mean, that's a problem that I think we have suffering in India. We keep on trying to imitate somebody and we are falling between the stools or the cracks in the... But the last point you made is very crucial. I think we have gone too far in our friendship with Israel. I mean, many of the children who are present here, sorry for using the word children, because I'm so old that everybody are children to me. I played a fairly key role in the move toward Israel. Prime Minister Narasimha Rao was the man who did it. He was very worried and concerned about the Muslim reaction in India and worldwide to our making up with Israel. All that time we were getting a lot of equipment from Israel clandestinely in various sense. The intelligence agencies themselves played a role in all this. And we worked out what would be the costs and what would not be the costs, and arrived at it saying that while there would be some murmurs, we could live with a relationship with Israel which would be of benefit to us. What has unfortunately happened over the years is that relationship has become far too close. I mean, Iran is important for us for not merely the oil that it has had. Shia Islam is a very important part of the Indian makeup. And I think, for such of those youngsters who are present here, when Khomeini captured power in Iran, when the Shah was overthrown, the first call he made was to Lucknow. Because the Iranian clergy in UP were held in such high esteem. So there is something, when we talk of soft power, we only talk of the American soft power, to use that. There is an Indian soft power. And Shia Islam is one of our strengths. It is kind of thing. And we have managed, I think in the past we have managed Shia Islam versus Sunni Islam in a manner that we have a place amongst the World Committee of Nations which have a certain respect for Islam. That is changing. I think we have been unfortunately caught into the vortex of what is called Western diplomacy. we are looking at everything from the point of how many guns do you have. You just now mentioned about the J-10C and whatnot. Yeah, immediately, 24 hours after the conflict, because of my past with many contacts, I got enough calls from France, because the information was that the Rafales had been knocked out. They're only looking at the point that, this is a kind of proxy war between arms suppliers. Those who built the J-10C, of course, is the Chinese one, but the Rafales are the French company, But beyond that, while we need to protect, I think we have a cross, and that's the main reason I mentioned that we have absolutely no influence in West Asia today. I don't care what anybody else has to say about it. We have lost influence in West Asia. I mean, there was a time when everybody in West Asia, whether they were Sunni or Shia, or whether they were Hindus or others, the various Abrahamic religions used to look toward. All that is gone. I mean, we are talking only in terms of, it's like I think, was it Napoleon who was it who asked how many divisions does the Pope have? Kind of, Hitler was the one who was. So what I'm saying is that's not the way that this world. Yeah, it is true that we need to have all the equipment that you require to fight a modern war. But when you're talking of influence, and we keep talking about India, nobody in West Asia today looks at India other than maybe if you have a trade relationship with India. India is one of the world's biggest markets, you're looking at it. So my point really is that we need to adjust to the reality of the situation. Israel is important, no doubt. We need to keep, but don't forget that the Arabs, or the West Asia is a very critical part of the Indian security architecture, and I think we're neglecting it. Southeast Asia, we have lost Southeast Asia. I mean, we are of no influence in Southeast Asia. I hope somebody is not going to report this to the Prime Minister and say that the former National Secretary. No, but it's a fact that over a period of time we have been taken in by the American philosophy of how to win enemies and lose friends. We have really lost our time. I mean, take our neighborhood, for instance. Bangladesh. How can you lose Bangladesh? We created Bangladesh. We were built. I was there. I was in Mujibnagar. I mean, these were people who were much closer to us than Indians. We have lost Bangladesh. Okay, Sheikh Hasina might have been, but if you can't control Sheikh Hasina, whom can you control? Sheikh Hasina or Sheikh Hasina's father is one. Sheikh Hasina definitely is our creation. And I think many of us have known of her. So, I think the message that you should go out from here is not merely about weapons and guns. I know you have the charter of what you want to do. But please understand that in creating spheres of influence, you require much more than guns and what. And if you don't have the butter, unfortunately we don't have oil and probably you don't have that, but we have so much more in terms of our historical background, our religious philosophies and whatnot. We are not exploiting that. We are not utilizing that. And this is true not merely about West Asia, across the world. I mean, Indians are, of course, we have got very rich people now. I mean, the Ambanis and Adanis can compete with the Rockefellers and everybody of the past. But that doesn't add up to India's areas of influence. So I want you to stress that point. I know this is maybe out of place, but this is a forum where, I think a lot of young people, and most of them are going out into, will all of them go into journalism or somewhere else? Yeah. So that they will understand and report back to us. And instead of merely reporting that we have great areas of influence. I feel that if you can lose Bangladesh, we can lose everything. For that matter, even Nepal is another country where we have lost a lot of our influence. And I'm worried that Bhutan is also slipping out of our grip. So I think while we stick to the parameters that you have drawn, let me, as being part of the system for nearly 70 years, let me tell you that I think we need to reshape our thinking as to how we are Yes, we need drones. Yes, we need hypersonic missiles. All that I concede. We need friendships, etc. But don't forget the nuclear part of your thought process, and the other nuclear one also. And it's seldom that the West will ever concede what you want. I was part of the nuclear dialogue. The entire American system, only one man was with us, President Bush. The U.S. Atomic Energy Establishment, the Department of State, the Department of Energy, every single one remained. We had only President Bush on our side, and the reason why he was on his side, I don't know, but one reason at least was, he said, Mr. Manmohan Singh is a good man. So, I mean, but it is a truism that you must remember, that many things are happened by good men, who people believe in good men and not merely in the guns. Yeah.
Fully agree with you. And the power of influence and the power of ethics and morals are equally important, extremely important. I would say they are more important than anything else. And in the context of what you mentioned about Shia, this thing, I believe the current Supreme Leader Khamenei has historical origins and links to Lucknow. That is also something that's been done. But let me come back to the technology and the weapons. In the context of what Manoj said, we must be very strong with Israel. I'm not sure I'll agree with that. I tend to agree with what Mr. Narayan said. We are tending to get too close.
It is important when we're doing it clandestinely, because nobody else would supply us any equipment.
That's true. That's true.
Now the whole world wants to buy from us, so I don't think Israel is so critical.
Absolutely. But in terms of technology, I've seen a lot of projects and we've been intimately involved. They are very, very smart businessmen. You don't get technology access. And in the long run, unless you have technology in your own control, you should not be dependent too much on somebody who is going to be supplying to you. And that is something we need to work on. I believe as of today, we've become too dependent on Israel. And I think we need to take cautious approach to that entire process. So in that context, I think, Manoj, what would you say about the recommendation that you're making in terms of, get closer and stronger with Israel? But that's not the ground story. You're muted.
I didn't get that. Could you again?
I'm saying there's a number of projects that we are doing with Israel. There are a number of weapons that we've bought from Israel. They're reliable. Israel is also a fairly reliable partner in terms of the support at critical times that we need. Kargil is one example. But in terms of a country's national strength and national priorities, Israel doesn't give you any technology as much as the Americans don't give you technology, or even the French don't give you technology. So I think we need to keep our options open, and we need to strengthen our own, processes, and not depend too much on one country. And in the longer run, as Mr. Narayan said, we need to look at the geopolitical balance and the influence that we need to build in terms of other aspects as well.
Well, all I can say is that you're an Air Force man, and recently the Prime Minister spoke about, yesterday he spoke about jet engine technology. And my point is, we've been trying for 30 years to make a jet engine. So there are some areas where some things are possible. There are some areas where some things are not possible. And I think, in the case of Israel, so when you have a whole range of areas which are not possible, it is better to hedge. In the sense, when I say hedge, you hedge technologically. That is, that you spread out your risk between United States, UK, France, Russia, Germany, different countries. But of course, we know in today's circumstances, for example, the US is an extremely dominant country, meaning many European countries also, their technologies have to be cleared by the United States. And that is also true of Israel. That Israel, Israel is not a free operator. in many of these technological areas. It has to get clearance from the United States. And we also know that a lot of modern technology, for example, we are talking about F-35s. Now, F-35s require constant upgrading of their software, which means that you are dependent on the United States, not just immediately, but you are dependent for all time. Meaning if that software has to be upgraded at every now and then, your dependency will remain. So there are certain areas, I think, in the sense self-reliance, we all know has been a key point and has been an effort by India to be self-reliant for strategic reasons. But somehow we have not been quite able to achieve that.
Right, but I think probably we can take some lessons, as I mentioned during the lunchtime. The J-10 is a development from the larvae, Israeli larvae. And today the Chinese don't depend on the Israelis on that. So that's one food for thought for everybody. But let me ask the Ambassador Mukhopadhyay, in the context of what you mentioned, that this is a tripolar world, and what Mr. Narayan said, we imagine much more than what we really capable of in terms of our influence. How do you think we are going to play a role in the changing dynamics? The world is clearly changing. The new world order is emerging. It's going to take about 20 years' time. That is evident right from the day the Ukraine war started.
Disorder is emerging.
Disorder, fine, out of it. But what kind of a effectiveness are we going to have when now Trump has literally put us on the mat with the tariffs, and we are now trying to rebuild a closer relationship with Russia, the China and India combination, and what will our position be in the BRICS? As BRICS gathers more momentum, much of the global south seems to be aligned with the BRICS as well. And where do we stand in the BRICS?
So, I think, there were some really interesting pointers in Manoj's talk, where I think basically the kind of steps that he outlined are steps for India in the long term. I mean, yeah, short term as well, but thinking sort of in the long view ahead. And I think there are certain fundamentals that we have that remain strong, so long we protect and nourish it. One is that we have a 1.4 billion population that is largely young. If you nourish it, it is a tremendous asset. If you don't nourish it, it could become a huge liability. And today, as we are entering an AI-centric world, I think it's also important that, one of the things that people talk about is the impact of AI on employment, but also like China is doing, which is that AI itself can be a new generation of the IT revolution. So we were there in Y2K at the turn of the millennium, but are we going to lose this next round or this next big technology? So I think one of the areas that we would obviously need to invest is in that. Secondly, we are a strong military. We are a nuclear power. We have technological prowess, and we are a huge market. So your basic fundamentals are right, are strong. Now the question is, frankly, what is missing is good leadership that is able to tap and, really channelize these kinds of, and sorry, I forgot to mention one very important thing. The fact is that, at least until recently, we were a genuine democracy, and we are a pluralist democracy. We just have every shade of diversity in our country. That diversity is a strength, it's not a weakness. And I mean, also Mr. Narayanan talked about just even within the Islamic world, the kind of diversity that we have. So I think these are things that are our strengths, and the question is, how do we develop that? Going a little beyond that, I would also say that, when we talk about 6-7% growth of India, we are talking about what proportion of the population? We are talking about maximum 100 million, 200 million. 500 million of that population of 1.4 crore is probably not even growing at 2%, let alone possibly actually 1%. Your agriculture is growing at 2%. That occupies 60% of your people. Why are we not making the kinds of investments that can step up your agricultural growth and the agri-industries that grow with it, that we showed in things like Amul, to 3% to 4%? Just imagine the energy and the growth that you will unleash by that. Far more powerful than, all the kind of nuclear arsenals that you might develop. So there are ways to do it, but I think what is lacking is to tap genuinely the democratic and demographic capital that we have. And that is really handicapped by our social system, by our caste system. I mean, the main reason why we don't tap that 500 million is simply, it is the preserve of largely, entitled class of people. So sorry, it's a bit of a roundabout answer to that, but that's the best I could give to you.
Thank you, sir, for very insightful points given by all, sir. It's actually more of an observation, and maybe if you can comment also, sir. We talked about defense technology and the denial by foreign countries. I've been highlighting my role in making Zorawar light tank, which I designed, which has come out so fast. I was part of the team which took the tank to Leh in 1987. We had taken, it was a secret project. Nobody generally knows about it. The same area where now we are fighting. At that time, China didn't even have a tank. But they have taken their time to build it. What I'm coming to is whether it was DARPA, which was established after World War II by the US, when they realized technology is the one which is required in defense, or the Chinese, all they have built these products by making special task forces, mission mode put together, given allotted funds. By our normal procurement systems, we can do improvements. A lot has been done in past 10 years. But if you really want to leapfrog, you have to put in, and I have been suggesting, of course I just hung my this thing, but South India is the place where we can put a defense ecosystem with the right people pushing projects and picking technologies and, that kind of a thing akin to something like DARPA. So I don't know, because otherwise, we just take a project to, you're aware, sir, whether it's Air Force or Army, it goes through that whole process. We may speeden up the process. We have IDEX, we have other things. But if you really want to, let's say jet engine, there has to be a mission mode on jet engine. Like that, you have a set of people who are, mix of defense researchers and all. So it's a comment. I don't know whether you agree with it or not.
So my question is, so how does India's significant partnerships in technological advancement as well as defense strategies with Israel intersect with our imperative, that is India's imperative to maintain the concept of macro stability, sovereignty and energy security, especially considering the risks of cyber attack and evolving forms of technological warfare?
My question is with respect to the nature of India's diplomacy. I mean, since our inception, our diplomacy has always been pretty amicable, and this is in stark contrast to China's wolf warrior diplomacy. And we have sometimes been too kind on people who have not fulfilled their commitments, and we have not been good friends enough with people who have helped us in times of need. Do you think that that nature of diplomacy needs to change, especially when we are looking at the scenario of the global order post 2022, where the world order is changing rapidly, and this is perhaps the best moment that we can take action to secure a role or a position?
So my question is, in the context of Israel, does the rise of Hindutva domestically truly have an effect on Indian foreign policy, which is expected to be unaffected by domestic politics, at least in theory?
So before Operation Sindhu, nobody was talking about Pakistan. But after that, Pakistan is everywhere, from White House to Baloch Liberation Army designated as a terrorist organization recently. So is it only the Trumps and Steve Witkoff's propensity to lock a deal on the minerals of Balochistan and the bitcoins, or it is more deeper than that?
I think one of the, well, I mean, not this lady, but one of the earlier panelists said said something on Indian diplomacy. I don't want to say that in front of diplomacy. I don't want to say that in front of Gautam.
No, please, sir. Please, sir, go ahead.
No,
I might actually add to it.
no. I believe that we need to redefine and redesign our diplomatic overtures to countries. I think we have largely been guided by the British system, which existed in the 30s and 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s of the last century. Today, I mean, while we look down upon Trump, transactional diplomacy is the need of, and the I don't know how many of you saw the way he went to West Asia, and in the space of 48 hours, he recaptured the influence of the United States in Saudi Arabia and other places, and threw out Russian and other influences. I mean, he called Salman saying, "Hey, Salman." Salman is God to many people. And so, Trump, I mean, I already have a visa. I hope he won't cancel my visa to the United States. Trump is crazy. There's no doubt about it. But there is a method in his madness.
There's a method. Yes.
There is a method in his madness. He manages to, he can be won over. He wants desperately he wants what do you call Nobel Prize. And he likes praise. I don't know how many people here are aware of the fact that one of the reasons why he's so, at least publicly, against India is because prior to the election, the Prime Minister had sent out messages to him and to Kamala Harris, and said that I would like to meet up with you before the elections. He promptly replied in the affirmative. Kamala Harris hawed and hummed and finally said no. So we didn't go through this. Now, that's no reason why you should behave in this, but that is Trump. He thinks that I've been insulted. And I suppose that's a human reaction to most people. So my point is, the days when you had diplomatic etiquette and you had you knew which wine to drink and which spoons to use and how you carried out yours is gone. You have to deal with the Trump elements in that. Pakistan is idle. You sent Asim Munir. I mean, he's a, God knows what he is, but he certainly is not a diplomat. And he goes out, he says, who is he to promise Trump a Nobel Prize? He goes there, Trump invites him to lunch. Exclusive lunch. How many of us were, I mean, I've been to that lunchroom only twice, and that too because the Prime Minister was invited, not because I was invited. So what I'm saying is, the nature of diplomacy is undergoing changes. Leaders are different. People are quite different. I mean, our Prime Minister is very different from, say, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru or Mrs. Gandhi. So this is the way we need to look at it. Right. So adapt our policies and our things to the winds that are going. I think that is what we need to do. I think that is not happening at the moment because most of us are accustomed to go in the way that we have. But we will suffer. But if you're looking only at Western leaders. But for the rest, I don't see why in our neighborhood and in West Asia, because we are one people in many ways. I mean, the Indian influence or the old ancient Indian influences are still present everywhere. So we can't have one stereotype kind of relationship, but I think it's possible. But we must understand we don't have it. The problem really, I think what one of the persons said was, we must realize we don't have it. We need to make extra efforts to do. And if China did not have planes before we did, but and now they have. Clearly, there is a message in that.
Absolutely. You want to add on to that?
Nature of diplomacy. One way of answering that question is really the ability to use both soft and hard power. I would say that one of the deficiencies that we've had is, let's say, in our relationship with our neighborhood, where we have generally sort of described our relationship, or the predicament that we've had is whether to be the good big brother or to be the tough big brother. And when we've been the good big brother, we have felt that we have been used. And when we've been the bad big brother, we basically, there's been a reaction. I think the issue really is that we need to get out of that kind of attitude and to have a much more solid and self-confident relationship based on essentially your strength. And that strength is something that we need to develop. Unlike, say, the Chinese have learned how to carve out, let's say, 1 unit of power into 10 units and then bargain with each of those, 1/10 of a unit. We have not been able to use and play power very well, except, I would say, in the time of Mrs. Gandhi. And again, if you look back at our foreign policy, Nehru, Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, and so on, Gujral, you'll notice is that Nehru was a great internationalist, but he ignored the neighborhood. Mrs. Gandhi was a bit of an internationalist, but she was basically took the approach of being tough on the neighborhood. I think Rajiv Gandhi in many ways had a very good balance of both international and domestic, but he made a severe misstep in Sri Lanka. Now, coming to the present, we started off with these big announcements about neighborhood first, act east, and we did some remarkable, gestures, the Nepal visit of Prime Minister and Bhutan. But 11 years down the line, our neighborhood is in a mess. And then we invested everything in big powers, and our big power relationship is in a mess. So, somewhere we've simply not been, and you see, all foreign policy is on a spectrum from, let's say, moralism or idealism up to what people like to call realism. And obviously the ideal golden mean is somewhere called pragmatism. But the question is I would see a lot in our foreign policy today in terms of opportunism. What's the difference between opportunism and pragmatism? The difference is that pragmatism has a spine. Opportunism has no spine. So what is your central spine? That if you know and you discover that and you're able to play to that, then you'll be able to combine these various things that that I talked about. Hindutva and foreign policy. Very good question. I would like to throw that question back at you. To what extent is our relationship with Israel shaped by some affinity that is there between Zionism and Hindutva? It's for you to answer that question. But clearly, today, if you look at the UN resolutions, 90% we are saying the right things. But somewhere deep down, it comes out that we are closet supporters of Israel, right? And again, what is it, the factor that it is the same, envy, the ability to act tough, be tough, all the things that we actually are not capable of doing, what I'm talking about, exercising power. What was the question on Op Sindoor? Yeah, Pakistan. Yeah, the biggest achievement of Op Sindoor is that we had dehyphenated our relationship with Pakistan, and were trying to hyphenate ourselves with China, and now China is completely, on a different orbit, and we are rehyphenated with Pakistan. So what have we achieved? We have achieved, diplomatically speaking, we have achieved nothing. In fact, we have rehabilitated the Pakistani army, which was discredited in its own country, and now it is not only consolidating its position within Pakistan, but it's also consolidated its diplomatic position internationally, and particularly with the United States and Russia and China. So we've given them, multiple victories without getting anything in return.
Thank you, Ambassador. So you want to say something?
Yeah. in my diatribe against Indian diplomats, I forgot. I do wish to emphasize also that it's important that we maintain an equilibrium with China. I mean, please don't allow yourself, I mean, particularly those of us who are going to report on national and international developments, don't get carried away by the Western concept about how China is a major threat to. I mean, I've dealt with, of course, longer than Gautam has, because I'm much older than him, with China. The Chinese will never be our friends, if you want to put it within friends in that. But I think that the Chinese recognize that they do not want a major conflict with India, because they cannot hope, I mean, even if they can make major dents, it will be at a tremendous cost. They do not want a conflict with India. We have a problem on the border with China. Neither India nor China knows where the border is. I say that because for 6 years I was the special representative for border talks. And before that I have dealt with it. Every dynasty in China creates a map and it includes a certain territory. No dynasty in India ever prepared maps because the Indians don't put anything on paper. Even our scriptures are all hand-me-downs on the thing. So we have a problem where there is some defined, undefined, ill-defined borders are there which the British drew at some stage. But beyond the border, there are issues, but both sides are extremely mature powers. I mean, they were civilizational powers in that sense of term. Don't get caught into the belief that India and China should have a conflict. We should prepare. I mean, always being prepared is important. We need to be careful, but do not get provoked into a conflict with China. Likewise, the Chinese don't want a conflict with India because they think that they want to be the world's #1 power by 2049. That is their targets. And a war with India will put them back. So, from our side, I mean, I don't think we should get. So, I am very hesitant about the utility of the Quad, for instance. It gives an unnecessary handle for China to say that what are the Indians doing in league with the Americans. So I just want that message to go across. I'm not trying to be an astrologer or so to say that, but please be careful. When you become journalists and on your own right, please moderate the thing. Don't tell people, oh, China is about to attack and the rest of India will go up in flames, saying, yes, we need to do that. These are two civilizations. There is a conflict between the Indian and Chinese civilizations. I think most countries across the world are willing to concede that the Indian civilization is more mature or more kind of thing. But we don't need to have a conflict over that. I just wanted to mention that point.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chicken.
Since we spoke about India's regional role and just for the information of our visitors, we have among our students a small sprinkling from the neighboring countries. We have Nepali students, we have Bangladesh students, we have Bhutanese students, we have Sri Lankan students. In the good days, we used to have Pakistani students and Afghan students, but Afghan students after Taliban takeover ceased. Pakistan students, given the close relationship between the two countries, don't get visas. So otherwise, just that's just by way of information. So I mean, I'm sure they are digesting what we are saying with those filters as well.
Okay.
And I just want to also mention how fascinated I was by, I don't know what Ambassador Mukhopadhyay was getting at, but the idea, at least I might be elaborating it all out of proportion, that just as Gorbachev was responsible for the collapse of what we know to be an entire bloc, East Bloc and the Soviet Union and so on, is Trump going to be the catalyst for the collapse of the championship of the free world, in terms of the unipolarity, or falsely called the unipolarity of the world. I wonder whether that was what was in the back of his mind, but that sounds like a fascinating idea, actually.
Gorbachev came to India when Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister. And he was an extraordinarily different kind of a leader. So he asked the Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, saying that, I want to go in for perestroika and glasnost and perestroika. I'm trying to liberalize, but I'm having problems. Different parts of Russia coming into raising issues, etc. You have a big country, and you had several problems. You have managed to deal with this, and you have brought about a certain amount of stability, peace, etc., etc. Would you try and explain? I think he meant it more as a flattery rather than. When Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was a very, very genuine person. He took it for granted. He said, "Okay." So he got hold of Mani Shankar Iyer, and he got hold of me. I was the director of intelligence, and Mani Shankar Iyer was there. And he said, "I'll ask these two gentlemen to prepare a paper as to what we did." And true to anything that the Indian bureaucracy does, we took a very long time to get that thing going. And if the paper was finally sent with Rajiv Gandhi putting it forward and all that, he went. 3 months later, Gorbachev lost his job. That is what is happening.
Shashi Kumar, I happened to be handling a part of the Soviet desk during the Gorbachev years. So, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, I meant it partly as just a dangling question, but also whether it's symptomatic of something else. But perhaps what was more important, which I forgot to mention, is really, if you look at history, the 19th century was the European century, and it was, the exhibits basically were engineering exhibits, the Eiffel Tower, for example. 20th century was very much an American century. I don't know how long the 21st century will go on, given climate change, nuclear, as well as artificial intelligence, God knows, black swan moments. But arguably, today, all the engineering marvels are coming really out of China. Of course, US power is so great that even to decline it will take a long time. And US corporations are still terribly important, in a worldwide. But yeah, the question is really whether in Trump's, capriciousness, there is a signal somewhere that the world order is changing, and the world order is and the rising power in this world order is going to be China. Is China, at least if we see technology and engineering as symbols of growth. And this is a kind of reality that we have to cope. It may not be a nice power in the sense of representing the values of the French Revolution that we had inherited so far. But really, if you look at the way the world is going in terms of the rise of authoritarianism, the rise of, you just wonder whether the French Revolution is going to be buried.
Thank you, Ambassador. Manoj, you want to give any comments finally? Yeah. You'll have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
I was not able to pick up some of the questions that were asked from by the audience, but I think generally I would like to make just one point, which is on technology. See, if you look at China and India, I think Moko referred to that. The point is that in 1990 we were roughly equal. Our GDPs were equal, our technological levels were equal. And today, of course, the Chinese are well ahead. One of the important things, they have stressed the same things that we are stressing. If you talk of Atmanirbharta, this has been a part of Chinese policy from the outset. They have never had a kind of a totally open policy at any stage. Number one. Number two, just looking at military technology is not good enough.
That's true.
See, you need to build up an ecosystem in which civilian technology is developed, and the military technology is a function of the civilian technology, not the other way around. I don't think you can do it the other way around. So if you look at today, the Chinese Pearl River Delta area, that's a huge area, that the whole area of Guangzhou and Shenzhen, that whole area is now an ecosystem where if anywhere in the world you want to build an electrical vehicle, electrical car, battery, you can't do without that area. So they have become the dominant force in a number of technological areas, and that is why we are now finding it very difficult to keep China at a distance, because we need that for our manufacturing revolution. Now the difference is there's a difference between Israel and China that way, and it's not just of size. See, Israel is basically an adjunct of US technology. It's an adjunct of US technology. And so it politically as well as technologically, it's like the 51st state of the United States. So the idea is the lessons are not so much from Israel, the lessons are from China.
Absolutely.
That we need to learn.
Thank you, Manoj. We come to the end of an excellent panel discussion with the eminent panelists. I just want to sum up with what General Bras said. I fully agree with him. And the reason for our start and stop kind of a development is that technology strategy continues. We don't have a national technology strategy in the way we've calibrated or crafted it for space and atomic energy. For the rest of it, what Manoj said is extremely important. Civil military fusion is important, but continuity and consistency has been one of our problems, failings, and that's where China scores over us. So I did this discussion with a Russian analyst. He said from the 50s, ever since 1949 China came into existence, they've used their association with Soviet Union and established their research institutions with tremendous continuity. And they modified and reformed it, but continuity was never lacking. And therefore, in 1996, we both signed the contract with the Russians for the Su-27, Su-30, both the same aircraft. That's a single-seater, we bought the twin-seater. And we produced 273 aircraft, probably another 20, 30 more, 300. The Chinese ordered 200 aircraft for licensed production. Before they produced 100 licensed produced aircraft, they had reverse engineered and produced the J-11. They stopped the other 100, and now they've started manufacturing J-11 series. J-11 to J-16 is better than the Su-27, Su-30 series. Today, the Chinese are flying the prototypes of two sixth-generation fighter aircraft. The American one is still struggling. The Europeans don't have a sixth-generation prototype, and our fifth-generation prototype is far away. So this is where we need to learn the lessons. So thank you very much for being excellent audience. Please give a big hand to our panelists. This is wonderful. Thank you, sir.